I think the good life is a life connected to self and others in an integrated or with integrity way, such that I'm not causing harm to myself or to others. And because I'm not causing harm and I'm looking into what's true, then I'm going to be more contented, and my life can become a teaching not only for myself but for others in my world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick Rodell. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today, our guest is Bhavani Siegel. Bhavani is a founding member of Mount Madonna Center, where she lives. She is a senior teacher in Mount Madonna Center's yoga faculty, where she teaches many aspects of yoga, including meditation, pranayama, and yoga philosophy. Bhavani loves chanting and ritual, mystic poetry, and the solace of nature. Hi, Bhavani.
Hello, Broderick.
Good to see you. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. I know that you have a lot of wisdom to share, many, many years of practice and ritual and chanting. And I think that there is a lot to glean from your life experience and your studies. So I think the audience should be excited to, as well to hear what you have to say to the world. So
thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So can you say a little bit more about yourself? How do you typically describe yourself? I know I just read that introduction, but I'd like for folks to say a little bit more about who they are and how they like to be known, I suppose.
Well, I think I would describe myself as a lifelong learner. That I want to be open to learning from life's experiences, from my relationships, from practice, whether that's individual practice or group practice in many different forms. And I would say I'm an aspiring mystic.
That's awesome. Yeah, I resonate with that lifelong learner. I love to learn, as you know. And there's something about learning and growing and developing yourself as a person. I don't know, there's something liberating about it. And it's fun too, actually.
It's what wakes the hearts up. Yeah, it's what wakes our heart up, right? And the inspiration for Mount Madonna Center, as you know, is a yogi from India who is no longer with us on the planet, but Baba Haridas is his name, and I knew him and practiced and studied with him almost 50 years. And something that he would tell us in terms of those of us who were teaching, what he had taught us was teach to learn and not to be a yoga teacher. Mm-hmm. Teach to learn. And I find that no matter how many years I'm doing this, the more true that becomes. Because if I have to, or I get to, share with others why these teachings and these practices have become so precious to me and so central to my life's aspirations as they continue to grow and change, but something that resonates as true and beautiful for me inside. If I have to or I get to share that with others, then I have to learn about it deeply. I have to explore all the different aspects of it, see if it changes over time or how it changes over time. Because I think we don't learn something and then move on only. I think that's kind of a really Western way of looking at learning. Like, you don't move on to B until you've mastered A. And one of the things that I appreciate so much about an Eastern approach to learning is that it's very circular, or even a spiral, perhaps, that we see what lands and sparks our internal growth and something that's true for us. And then we're going to study it and practice it again and again and again throughout our life. We called him Babaji, which just means revered or respected grandfather. It's a tradition in India to use a family member's name for anyone you have affection and respect for. So, Babaji would say, sadhana or spiritual practice isn't something that we do just in the morning or just on our cushion or just on the mat. It's our whole life. And it's something that continues throughout our life, every day. A lot of times when people would ask him all different kinds of questions, sometimes the answer would be similar. And the answer was regular sadhana, or daily practice. And he emphasized that more than what kind of practice you did or even how much of it you did, this regularity of creating that imprint. Now in neuroscience, they might call it a neural pathway, that the neurons firing together, wired together, and that we make those grooves that support us to do it more and more. So yeah, I think that our practice, our learning, it never stops. At least I hope it never stops.
Wonderful. Me too. Wonderful, wonderful. So yeah, you've already jumped into yoga and practice, and so I'm going to ask this question. I like to ask in the very beginning, and then see what unfolds from this question. So, what is the good life for you, or what does it mean to live well? What does that mean for you in your life? And yeah,
it's hard to say, really. Trying to put it into just a few words, but I think the good life is a life connected to self and others in an integrated or with integrity way, such that I'm not causing harm to myself or to others. And because I'm not causing harm and I'm looking into what's true, then I'm going to be more contented, and my life can become a teaching not only for myself but for others in my world. That's one way I could describe the good life. Because I do believe in the ripple effect. I believe in the ripple effect, that what I think, what I feel, what I do today is creating our tomorrow, is creating my tomorrow. And if I'm living moment to moment with awareness and with as much peace and contentment and kindness as I can, then that's going to be creating the next peaceful moment, the next kind moment, the next contented moment.
Absolutely. I completely resonate with that. That the habits that we engage in has an influence on the next moment, for sure, absolutely, and on others. I like how you preface your view of the good life with others involved in it. I think that's been a common theme thus far with a lot of people, that the good life is not just self-centered. There are others involved, and how I show up as a self in this world has a major impact and influence on everyone else.
I
It
do
has a
think we're
rippling effect,
relational
not just in my own
beings.
personal. Yeah, exactly. And so, not just in my own personal life, it ripples in my own personal life, but it ripples into in the larger field of consciousness that we all are an expression of. And I think this is great that you jump right into that. Yeah. So
And
we're
I
going to
think I
unpack that
think
for the
that's
rest
one
of
of
this
the reasons.
conversation.
Excuse me, go ahead.
No, 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 go for it. That's it. Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons that in yoga philosophy, non-harming or ahimsa is considered the most important quality. You know, the first two limbs of classical Ashtanga yoga, Ashtanga just means 8 parts or 8 limbs. And these are the traditional teachings of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, or the same things that you find in Bhagavad Gita. Those are sort of two kind of source texts that we studied many, many decades with Babaji. And he would say that if we try to do any of the other contemplative practices that are contained within the path of yoga, breathing practice, meditation, postures, all of the different ways of internalizing, if we don't first make a foundation of I call them the jewels of awareness in a way, the Yama and Niyama, the first two limbs, that bring attention to the consequences of our moment-to-moment interactions with ourselves and with others. He would say it's like trying to carry water in a sieve to do any of the other yoga practices without those as the foundation. And of those, there's 5 principles or precepts to these first two limbs. And among all 10, the first principle of non-harming or non-violence is considered the most important foundation, and that all of the others, if there's any kind of wondering or conflict between some of the two, which of course we find in our daily choices, then the others bow to non-harming or non-violence, so that can be kind of our litmus test, our place of reflection inside. Say, for instance, with something like truthfulness, which is the second quality of the Yama, or the things that we kind of want to let go of, as opposed to Niyama, which means the things that we want to embrace and cultivate, different ways of thinking about the same thing. But truthfulness is the second. But if we are aware that our truth, telling our truth in the way that maybe we want to, is going to cause harm, then truthfulness bows to non-harming. So I might have to find a different time to say it, or a different way to say it, or reflect on if this is an agreement in our relationship with each other. How much are we going to tell each other our versions of the truth? So the how of our communication and our relating to each other becomes just as important as the what.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's fascinating. Yeah, how even in the yogic tradition, where it's about a lot of it is about overcoming yourself. I'm saying that in a very I'm overly simplifying this, but for the nature of this type of conversation in this space, getting over ourselves. There's this important piece of, well, there are other beings out there in the world. We're in this relational field with other beings, and we have to take that into consideration. So, like you said, just meditating or just doing all these breathing exercises so I can have this personal experience without taking into consideration that relational field I like that. It's like a sieve trying to carry water in a sieve that it's just going to keep leaking out because it's not, you're missing something. You're missing the most important thing is that relational feel
That's
that
right.
we're all engaged in. And we all have a responsibility in that relational feel. Yeah.
There's a
That's
beautiful
awesome.
term called satsang.
Um,
There's a beautiful term called satsang,
mhm.
which means the company of those seeking truth or divine presence, or sat can mean many things. One of the things that I love so much about the language of Sanskrit is that one word can contain a whole deep well of teaching and knowledge, and often can't be confined to just one English word translation. So sat can mean lots of different things. But I think that's one of the main purposes of a place like Mount Madonna Center, an intentional community. We call it an experiment in intentional living, is that we do need each other. Because, yeah, you might be able to feel fine about yourself in your own individual practice, but then if you go out after that practice and be a jerk to somebody else, or unkind, or thoughtless, then is that an integrated experience? Is that something that's going to really deeply not only satisfy us, but create the kind of world we want to inhabit?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, that's we're we're responsible for each other. I like to suggest that my practice, my life, there's a responsibility that I have to be good, to do good, to live well, to cultivate myself, develop myself for the sake of others, not just myself. And I think deeper, and the deeper we go into this, and like, well, there's that much separation between you and I, in this relational field. What is at the foundation of that relational field? It's all this, there's this continuity that we all share, and some call it consciousness, and there are various names that people want to give for it, but the name is not important because the name is only a finger pointing at something that's indescribable and ineffable. But that we have something in common, and how we treat each other says a lot about who we are, and and what we're doing, and the things that we're saying that we're doing. No, that's great. So I want to unpack a lot of this a little bit more. You said quite a few things there that I think is very, very, very interesting. I know we talked about learning, and you start to share a little bit about your take on learning. And you also brought up something else, practice. Can you say a little bit more about practice, and practice in the context of um, this life that we're trying to live, and trying to live a good life or live well? I'm just using those terms, but just in general.
Mm. I think practice is whatever method we adopt that cultivates awareness, that cultivates being conscious of our actions. And actions aren't only just what I do with my body, they're also my speech. Even my thought and feeling is an action. And like you said, Broderick, in one way, are we separate from each other? Even I don't know a lot about modern scientific discoveries, but I hear that more and more science is discovering that we are all part of the same field of energy that relates to and is all part of one thing. So what I do to you doesn't only affect you, it affects me at one level of cellular energy, or not even cellular, beyond cellular. We aren't separate. And so whatever practice I can do, whether it's an attitude of service that wants to serve the greater good, so that would be practice as an attitude in my daily life, or formal practice that might include any number of dozens of methods. I do really resonate with the container of yoga. People ask me, how did you choose that as your spiritual path? And I say, I didn't choose it, it chose me. I was looking for something that would resonate as true inside. And as an adolescent, I dabbled with all different kinds of spiritual practices and philosophies. And I did yoga postures and yoga breathing with my parents and twin brother to PBS when I was a kid. So I had some introduction to it, but like many Westerners, I didn't know that it was a way of life and a whole philosophy, and not just a way to feel even relaxed or get in shape, or, those kinds of things. And so in the way that I learned from Baba Haridas, from my teacher, was about this huge tree of yoga philosophy that had so many branches and leaves and blossoms that one can choose from, and that it's recommended to choose those things that suit your own individual nature, because even if we're all the same inside, or all divine presence or consciousness or love or whatever you want to call it, we also have our unique container that is our field of experience. So it's recommended to choose methods that your own heart and mind resonate with, in whatever way helps us to develop letting go of our identification as a separate being that only sees what's for me and what's not for me, and identifies more with a universal sense of being. And in yoga philosophy, it's said that anything that calms the thought waves in our mind, whether that's, you mentioned in the beginning that I love chanting, that's a method of stilling the mind, especially when we add the resonant vibrational qualities of the Sanskrit language. We know in neuroscience that focusing on sound and long exhale and other types of practices involved in something like chanting engage the polyvagal pathway, which balances the autonomic nervous system, which gives us more access to the relational and connecting part of our brain, our embodied brain. So, and so anything that quiets the mind and allows us to experience that is practice to me.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Your take on practice is how the way I'm taking it is, how we place our attention and the intentions that we have. It's almost like prayer, and the various actions that we do with that, and having that intention of connecting to something higher and greater than our individual selves, and taking on some action and focusing our attention in ways that can help us connect to that better. Is that?
Definitely. And anyone who has tried to quiet the mind, tried to sit and become still, and not only body, but in the mind, in the feelings, knows that it's not easy. That the natural the natural flow of the mind is outward. We learn in yoga philosophy that the natural flow is outward of the attention through the senses to the objects of the senses. Nothing wrong with it. We need it to move and work in the world. However, that natural flow outward becomes a challenge or an obstacle when we want to rest inside of our own self, when we want to try to experience the depth of our own being and the place where we do connect with not only other human beings, but all of nature. So because it's not easy, then there are all these, Babaji would say it's a bag of tricks. Tricks, plays, but very important to find the truth. So what is in my bag of tricks? For me, one of them is using Sanskrit chanting with mantras that have been chanted sometimes in the same or very similar ways for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And I feel like I'm connecting with all those souls for thousands of years who have chanted these mantras or these sacred sound formulas that have as its basis this universal awareness or consciousness. This is the purpose of those mantras, and sometimes the meaning of those mantras. That I feel like I'm connecting with like a river of souls, an unbroken river of souls, for all of those thousands of years that have used these sacred sound formulas as a vehicle to bring them home, to bring them back to the source, for their homesickness for God, or wholeness or goodness or peace or love. So that became a major support for me when my own health dictated that certain practices were no longer available to me that I was able to do before these health challenges came on. And when I spoke to my teacher about that I could no longer do certain things that I had become very attached to, dependent upon, connected to. And that can be a double-edged sword, because I wasn't understanding, and I was quite young when this started, my mid-20s. So I didn't understand that the method didn't matter as much as the doing. And that's what Babaji reflected to me. He said, "You're not understanding the point." When I said, "Well, I can't do this anymore, Babaji, and I can't do this anymore, and I kind of don't feel like a yogini anymore." And that was his reply to me, "You're not understanding the point." And I said, "Right. And that point is?" And he said, "Those are methods. They're means to a goal. They're not the goal. And if your life circumstances are that you can't use these methods, you can use other methods." And he counseled me in the way of Sanskrit and chanting, I think, for two reasons. One is that I didn't need to be able to do a certain kind of holding my breath or putting my body into a certain posture, even sitting for a long time in meditation to do these. I could do mantra while walking. I could do it with others. I could do it by myself. I could do it with music or without. I could do it completely internally. So I think he held a mirror up, not only because it was something that any body in any condition could do, but also because he saw that I had a real interest in it. The first time I heard Sanskrit chanting, it just touched a different part of me than any other music or singing or chanting had before. Not that I don't still love and appreciate all those other kinds, but it touched a different place in me. And now it's become kind of like a life raft, and I teach it. Teach Sanskrit pronunciation. I teach about mantra philosophy. And this is what I was saying earlier about teach to learn. That so important, teaching from our teacher to us, like, why has this become so important to me? Why has this become so helpful? And so that's a very hopeful thing to me for all of us, that we can all always find some kind of method that helps support that turning inward and discovering our true nature, which is the aim of, I think, all contemplative practice.
Mm. Yeah,
As
I
an
love that. I
example.
think you've, yeah, it's great example. And you touched on so many important things there, how each one of us have a nature. We're going to be attracted to certain activities to help us refine ourselves to be a better person. And things come up in life, suffering, challenges. And that may narrow the activity that we can engage in, the practice that we can engage in to help us. And that's hard sometimes. I can hear that. That's hard to accept, especially a 20-something-year-old. That's like, oh, really? If I could think about being in my 20s, that's you got something you like to do, and something comes up and you can't do it any longer. That's very hard.
Yeah.
It's like the world is ending. And for you to continue to say, okay, I'm not going to give up on my practice. I'm not going to give up on the goal. And to have someone like Babaji there to be like, you don't have to give up on the goal here. There are other tricks in the other tools in the toolbox,
Yeah.
other tricks in the bag. I like that bag of tricks that you can engage in. And now look at you, you fall in love with it. I've been in a space with you chanting, and I've been a student of yours in chanting and seeing how you glow in that. And I think that's something that we can all learn from, that, we have a thing that we may be interested in and we may be drawn to, but things in life happen. But it doesn't mean that we have to quit. We can still engage in activity that help facilitate a desire for peace and love and these various positive qualities that we've been talking about, that we don't have to give up. We don't have to quit when those challenges arise.
And those challenges, although, I let the universe know regularly that I'd be happy to learn from some gentler lessons, but it's an interesting
Right.
place. It's an interesting place to find yourself and see. I now, looking in hindsight, I was very distressed about it, as you say, as a young woman that just was used to doing whatever I wanted, and now and even so, I see that my own pain has opened up compassion for other people's pain in a way that I'm not sure I would have learned. And other things like the flexibility to adapt when our life circumstances, whether that's health, occupation, anything that we desire that may or may not come about. I mean, there's so much in life we are not in control of. We are in control of our responses or our knee-jerk reactions, but there's so much we're not in control of. Do we have the flexibility to adapt to those and see where I'm being called now? And I did not have it at that time. So even though, like I say, I'd be happy to not have it be quite so challenging, I see how much I've learned, and I see how much it's led to growth and connected me with others in a way that maybe wouldn't have been available. But who knows, you know? I don't need to know, because this is what was available. And when we ask ourselves, like you're doing in such a beautiful way, to inquire into what is the good life, I think the answer, there are no one answers, but asking the question is really important. And
Yes.
there's this interesting dance. It's kind of like in meditation, where we want to be soft and relaxed, but not so soft that we turn into jelly, you know? We want to have the firmness and the attention combined with that softness and relaxedness, in a way. This interesting dance of almost paradoxes. And I think that's true of the question you're asking. This interesting dance of, I want to be better, I want to improve, I want to grow. That's one open door. And the other open door is accepting what is, and not blaming ourselves or making ourselves wrong for where we happen to be on that journey. I don't know if that really makes sense, but it's kind of an analogy that I see, you know, of accepting and knowing, you know, like all the great poetry and scriptures say, you know, be still and know that I am God. At the same time, I absolutely don't act like that a lot of the time. You know, I have other conditioning and other veils that need to be removed before I can be established in that place and unified with that and relating from that, so well as still holding the knowingness inside that in our core is what we seek, is what we are looking for. And it's not to be found out here, but it matters what we do out here, even in that search for that peace or essential nature.
Yeah. It's like that. You know, people usually refer to it as a Buddhist teaching, but there's a teaching throughout yoga and the various traditions that Buddhism comes out of these shramanas, these wandering ascetics, looking for peace, some 2,500 years ago or more. That this idea that they're in life, they're suffering. And yet, the paradox, like we have to accept that suffering. And at the same time, the whole path of the yogi, one major foundation of the yogi's practice is, or path is, overcoming that suffering. So it's inevitable, yet we're working to overcome it. This idea we're getting better, but it's almost like the human contract that we have, this paradox of like, well, why? Why do I need to go through this in order to have this realization? And it's like, I don't know, maybe. But it is what it is. It's like, I have this challenge, and can I accept it? It's not accepting victimhood and accepting that there's nothing that I can do. That's not what we're saying. Just accepting, like, okay, this is what is happening. And to fight that and to pretend that it doesn't exist is only going to exacerbate my suffering. Like you said, how we relate to that challenge or the suffering that we may be undergoing. And we can still find an avenue to relieve some of that suffering that we may be experiencing. We can prevent unnecessary suffering on top of what we already have. And you said something else I think that's really important. And I hear people say this, and I don't know, I think some people say this to the extreme. So yes, in life there's suffering, but it's almost like, yes, suffering is great. Like, well, hold on for a minute. You don't have to take that extra step because of what you said, that, like, this thing is help you have compassion for others, your challenge. And you're like, oh yeah, that's a good thing that I'm learning from this challenge. It doesn't mean I have to like it necessarily. It doesn't mean I have to like celebrate it. No, that's not what we're saying either. And there are people who like, no, suffering is just, this idea of trying to overcome suffering is just a bad idea. I'm like, no, you're confusing. It's not necessarily a bad idea to try to mitigate exacerbating that suffering. That's what people, that's what way I take it. It's just that you acknowledge that you have,
And also,
yeah, you can acknowledge that you have it, and okay, and now how do I not make this worse? And how do I learn from it? That's, I think, what you're saying. And at least that's where I'm coming from with it. I don't mean like try to pretend that it doesn't exist and then at the other extreme try to celebrate it either. I'm like, no.
or court it.
Right.
I know, exactly. Or try to make it happen in some ways. I think that's the difference between pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That pain is inevitable in this life, and we live in a pairs of opposites world. If we wanted something different, we got off on the wrong plane.
Right.
This is that kind of acceptance. There's going to be these pairs of opposites that we experience, but my reaction to it is where the suffering is.
Yes.
I can say that I really don't suffer very much anymore from this illness. I have pain from it, absolutely, 24/7. And that was another thing that Babaji said to me early on. He said, you can have physical pain and mental and emotional suffering, or you can just have physical pain. If that is what, is bearing fruit in my karma, mm-hmm. The idea of certain things are already set in motion. My twin brother and I share this autoimmune disease generated by how we were born and how early we were born. So that's already happening. It may not be a choice of mine, even though I tried different things, and I think I would be worse if I didn't live the way that I do. And yet it's not completely up to me whether it's going to be there or not. But my response to it, or my reaction to it, that is the only thing sometimes in life that we do have effect on, mm-hmm. or that is our choice, right? And I think if I could talk to that 23, 24-year-old girl, I would let her know that's something true, that as much as it goes against our grain, we can have pain without suffering. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to try to help that pain. Like you mm-hmm. said, we're not going to go and celebrate and not try to help ourselves or heal ourselves. Or I also believe that there's healing always possible, even if curing isn't. Mm-hmm. And that was a big thing for me to come to, that I might not be able to be cured, but I could still be healed. Mm-hmm. And I would say that my practice is the greatest thing that's helped lead me to that place. That there's a part of me that is completely whole, untouched by any of this, and not limited by anything in my outer life. It's sometimes not so easy for me to contact that place, but that's one of the beautiful discoveries of having a lifelong practice, though, that throughout all the seasons of our life and the seasons of our openness and not so open and everything that we go through, there is some kind of continuity of that place inside that is completely unbroken, that is always whole, that is always healed. And I don't think that 23 or 24-year-old believed that that was possible. Like you said, it just felt like the end of the world. And so that's a great teaching to me over all these years.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing it. There's so much wisdom in that. And I think here I am at 49 and I'm still learning that lesson. Probably going to keep learning until the day I die, until I leave this thing. And the audience, I hope you're hearing that. There is the good, when we say good life, that's why you interchange that between living well, because what we mean by the good life doesn't mean that everything is good and pleasurable. That's not what we're talking about. You can still live well and gain some really deep, profound insights into your very nature, even when things ain't all good, quote unquote, all good, in terms of, you're going to have pains. Well, I say like shit happens. It's almost just like, why? And when it happens, you're going to be like, why? Why is this happening? But
it's the unanswerable question, right?
Exactly. And so
why?
Torturing ourselves, why is this happening to me? And it's just suffering. It's like you said, it's that reaction to it, relating to it and getting all upset. Like that upset is causing more pain and causing more dysfunction, even if it's on a physiological level. But then on a psychological level, it's a form of imprisonment. And we can ask why all we want, like God, universe, divine. I just don't understand it. Okay, maybe it's my karma, this lifetime after lifetime, my soul, my spirit. This is where I'm at. Okay, no matter what story I use, it goes back to what you said earlier. We just have to accept it, relax around it, and do the best we can and still live well in the process. We can find a way to live well with what we have. Like in your case, you didn't choose it. Just, there are things I have in my life that are very annoying. Physiological things that have happened in my past. I'm like, I didn't choose it. And there are moments when I'm like, I just wish that could have been avoided. Like, what was the necessity of that? And I'm still dealing with that, and I know as older I get, the older I get, that thing is going to exacerbate likely, even though I take care of myself, health and everything. But I know as I become an older and older man, my prostate is going to be a challenge. And I do all these things that I can.
The suitcase is going to get old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I was just reading a little Buddhist pamphlet, little booklet that someone gave me from a Dharma talk that a teacher was giving. And in one of the paragraphs, the teacher was saying that the Buddha would point out when people attributed what was happening to them only to their own personal karma,
mm-hmm.
that was a misunderstanding.
Yes.
And he called it an overreach, that I'm ill in one way because I have a body.
Yes.
A body that's fallible. I'm getting old because old age happens. These things are part of the nature, and there's collective action as well as individual action. And there's, now they're talking about epigenetics and things that our ancestors did that affect us, our DNA and all of our everything, But what you said about the choice where we place our attention, I'm reading some new neuroscientific discoveries that says that is completely creating how physiologically your embodied brain and nervous system is reacting. And and no matter what circumstances we find ourselves in, that's still true, that what I place my attention on is going to be opening up certain portals of being able to relax in the moment, as opposed to getting more constricted around what's happening, and you could take that metaphor into mental and emotional constriction as well as physical.
Yes.
So yeah, I think there's always some choice there. And in today's world, where a lot of the choices seem to be so unconscious, and we can sometimes feel powerless to affect some things, in this life. But in that connection with each other, those choices of what we pay attention to matter in real ways, like you're talking about. So, and that those changes within our organism can happen, like you just said, up until the day you leave it. We can always create new neural pathways. And I was reading one author, Daniel Siegel, neuroscientist, and he runs the MindSight Institute at UCLA. And I went to hear him speak in Santa Cruz a few years ago. And he was talking about something in our brain and nervous system called mirror neurons that allow us to empathize with someone else's experience, that allow us to connect with another's experience, just like we connect with our own. And when I heard him say that, I wondered, like when I'm feeling that deep connection to a particular mantra being chanted, and all of the thousands of years that it's been chanted, and all of the longing for wholeness that kind of is underneath the chanting of that kind of mantra. I thought about, like mirror neurons of the soul, of do we connect even beyond these two human beings having the mirror neurons to map out another person's experience, but as a collective, do we have that potential? I think so.
Me too. Yeah, I like that analogy. Me too. I do agree. That resonates with me too. I think, these are metaphors, of course, but these metaphors are very useful in helping us having a certain kind of understanding that's hard to explain. And we use story and narrative to try to explain it, but that story and narrative would never be satisfactory. And it bumps up against materialistic scientific perspective. And I'm not worried about that anymore. I'm like, I understand enough about how the world works, how the universe works, and how it does, and understand that I don't know and don't understand a lot. That I do recognize that there's something to what you're saying, and it's because you can experience, you can feel it. It's like you can tap into it. You know it. You know it absolutely. With chanting mantra, you feel something. You're like, what is this? It's not just me. There's something going on that I'm resonating with, that I'm tapping into, that I'm feeling into, that's been before me. And in the way we look at time, and in physicists now, and where they're talking about time and stuff like that, there's this future and past, and we know that that's related to the events of our life. We can talk about future and past and future rather, but there's something. Time is much more complicated than that, or you can say simpler than that. That it's in this experience, it's like a block of it, just experience itself. That's, I'm not doing justice to this because I don't want to get into physicists talking about time and getting way complicated, but there's a lot to what you're saying, and it resonates with me, and I think it resonates with a lot of people. And they may not have the language to say it, but there's something to that. And I think we get into to the end of our discussion here. I think one of the things that I'm taking from this, because you brought it up again, this importance of practice and learning, that even as it's challenging, and I guess we can connect it to where you're talking about with chanting mantra and connecting with those in the past, those souls, those spirits in the past who've chanted this mantra over and over and over again. It's like a habit that's been created in the universe through this constant chant, and you get to tap into that habit. How that practice is like a reminder when things are really hard in life, the importance of having a practice, the importance of tapping into something greater than ourselves, to engage in activity that's been happening for a long time prior to us. New activities too, but no, there's something to having that practice, like Babaji said, that regular practice to fall on, that sadhana.
Yeah.
To fall on when the inevitable pains of life come, where we have to face those inevitable pains of life. Having that regular practice, does that resonate with you? And
Yes.
do you want to say anything else about that?
No, I think that says it well. More important than even what we experience in an individual session of practice. I try to define a good practice as one that I do. That's it. Nothing more. Not where my mind went. I can't remember the Christian mystic who said, if my mind goes away 1,000 times in my time of prayer and I bring it back 1,000 times, it will be a time well spent. Right. I think it's more important than what we experience, what the form of the practice is, even how much of it we do. Because we can have these weekend warrior kind of habits in our culture where you don't do anything except on the weekend, and then we don't have that place to come back to because we haven't created the ground. Mm-hmm. It feels like preparing a field for planting something. You need to prepare the ground. It needs to be soft and the earth broken up, and then it needs the right elements of sunshine and water and that, rich earth to grow something that we want to grow. Mm-hmm. And it all starts with knowing what we want to grow. And if we attend to that every day, even just a little bit every day, we're giving the nutrients for that thing that we want to grow to sprout. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's regular sadhana, huh? Regular practice.
Regular sadhana.
Such wisdom. That's so simple. Teach to learn. Regular sadhana. Fundamental practices that you've pretty much you've elaborated on quite a bit in this discussion.
And open to the form, because we don't necessarily even get to choose completely the form that's going to be open to us. But there always is one. There's always a way to come home to ourselves.
Oh, beautiful. What a great way to close out this conversation. I am going to ask you one more thing.
Okay.
Is there, coming back home, I really like that, Bhavani. Is there anything else you want to leave the audience with? It can be anything you would like to leave us with.
For some reason, This quote of Jung's is coming in my brain right now. He talked about true sacred images, that an image is sacred because it participates in the mystery toward which it points. And I do love ritual. I didn't grow up with rituals, so when I learned some of the traditional rituals that can overlap with yoga teachings, especially in devotional path or the way of the heart. But I think I take it even greater than the sacred images may be invoked in some of those rituals, like a fire as a symbol of universal consciousness, which is used in my favorite ritual of the Vedic rituals that Babaji taught us. But even extending it to that sacred image as a metaphor for everything we interact with, everything that comes in our field of experience and who comes in our field of experience. That metaphor as image, as sacred image, participating in the mystery toward which it points, like there's more there than we know. So I keep trying to open myself up to that mystery that is more than maybe some of my faculties is able to know through my senses, perhaps. But those images, those sacred images, are there to guide me because they participate in the mystery toward which they point. And that's another aspect of practice for me, is always opening myself up to what can point me to that mystery, to experience it. I don't even know what that's exactly going to look like. I get glimpses, and those glimpses keep me wanting more. That's, for some reason, that's what popped up.
Beautiful. I just absolutely love it. That's something to definitely reflect on, and I'm going to definitely be reflecting on that. Thank you so much, Bhavani. This has been a pleasure. You're a very special human being to me. You're a teacher of mine. I am very grateful for this conversation. Audience, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I have. This has just been great. And I love you to pieces, Bhavani. This is great. I knew it was going to be great. And I am,
I feel the same.
I know. And I'm just, I feel honored. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you soon and talking with you some point soon. All right. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.